Welcome to this talk. I'm here, my name is Sarina Canelake, I work on the edX team, and I'm here with Xavier and Antoviaque from OpenCraft, and we're going to give a joint presentation today about contributing to edX. So, I hope you enjoy it.
Thanks. So, yeah, the talk is about contributing to edX. So, before entering into the how, one of the first questions is why? Why would I contribute anything to edX when I can just use the code on my own and do what I want? So this is this is a creation by a Japanese artist, Kazumana, I don't know if I pronounced that right, who enrolled thousands of children to decorate a white room originally, each of them with a little dot. So if we imagine that each of those is a kind of contribution, each of these dots, we quickly realize that if the artist was doing that all on his own, it will not only be pretty long and boring for him, but it will probably not be as interesting as a result at the end. So the issue is that that's the theory. We like this image, at least for when we contribute to open source or when we use it, but when we actually have a dot with us, when this is with us and we are in front of a change that we just needed to make to edX, we have the choice: do I contribute that? Do I make that extra effort to get it into the main project, or do I just go along with my day and keep that dot for myself, basically? Usually, at least in too many cases, the answer is just to not contribute it. And one of the reasons for this is that we imagine at that point that the choice facing us is, am I going to do something easy or something a little bit more difficult? Am I going to just like sit with that change and just use it, or contribute it to the rest of the community? The problem with that approach, however, is that after some time will come a new release of edX, and we'll want to use those new features from that release. So it means that the code from that new release will need to be reconciled with our changes, and that will often come at the cost of changes that we need to make in addition to the initial ones. So one of the things that we hear people say about open source is that this is basically the right to do whatever I want with the code. This is true, of course, but only if you actually end up just taking a version of edX, for example, and staying with that forever. Then, yes, you do whatever you want with the code, and nobody is going to be able to tell you anything. But as soon as you want to upgrade, then you'll have to acknowledge that you're actually, whether you want it or not, part of a community, and that you need to pay attention to what other people are doing and try to make sure that other people pay attention to what you're doing too, because that's going to impact you. Another misconception that we get with open source is that contributing is a purely selfless act, something just out of the goodness of our hearts. Well, there might be some of that, but at the end, you're also helping yourself, or at least future you, when the next release will come, and whether or not you did that contribution will be the difference between having to just upgrade to the new release, or having to spend the next 2 months trying to upgrade and failing a lot along the way. So the best way to represent what happens when you get something merged is actually to use this screen. So that's what is shown to contributors of edX, including core contributors, when trying to merge new code into the platform. There is an automated testing that allows to see if all the tests are passing. So once your code will have been merged, if someone breaks your feature or makes changes that requires changes in your own feature, if it is detected by the unit test, it will be represented to him by this little red cross over there, saying that it's failed and that he has something to fix before being able to proceed and merge his code. So in a way, that little red cross, it represents hours, if not days, or sometimes weeks of your work that you either get immediately kind of for free by asking the next person coming after you to take into account your changes and changing it on his own, or you are going to be the one having to fix those exact same issues at the next release of OpenEdX by doing them all manually. So one of the tricky part also about this is that at first making changes on your own fork feels like something that has very little influence. But as time passes, new changes arrive, you need to adapt to new release and etc. This accumulates and quickly can at some point feel very sudden. But it's just the exponential curve that feels like that. The beginning feels very slow, but then progressively you accumulate the problems until you end up spending sometimes in some teams months to update to the new version of OpenEdX. So the right approach, because it's like you can't always contribute every single change that you make. Sometimes you will be pressed by time, sometimes maybe some of your contribution will not fit into the main repository or will be refused, is that whenever you need to make a change that is actually not merged upstream, it's to treat it as a code smell. Meaning that as bad as like a duplicated code within your own code base or any other kind of code smell or technical debt. It's something that you will have to maintain over the long term and pay the accrued interest on. So it's not contributing, it's not only avoiding bad stuff, it's also getting good stuff. Because when you contribute, you also get for free the reviews of core developers, people who are really knowledgeable about the OpenEdX code, and get to contribute their own view and maybe sometimes give you some advice that can give you a better approach. So that's something that can be very helpful when you need afterwards to get your own code into production with your own students. And it's also much more enjoyable work too, because you'll end up being much more proud of what you do. So now the how. So one of the things that we hear a lot, and it's kind of true, is that it's not simple. Like that's all the big steps within the contribution process. So from a distance, it looks like, oh, there is a lot going on there. I'm not sure I want to know more about this actually. But if you look at it closely and go really to the essential, going through the contribution process can be reduced to 3 simple things that you need to follow in order, that you need to follow pretty thoroughly. But if you forget everything else in this talk, keep just those 3 things and you'll be fine the next time you need to contribute something to OpenEdX. The first step and the most important one, and that can and should most of the time happen before you write actually any code, is to get buy-in. So talking about your change on the mailing list, or maybe posting a simple work in progress pull request just to get feedback on the approach, just to make sure that the work that you're doing is going in the right direction and that you won't have to redo everything. Early on, you still have a lot of margin into deciding on an alternate approach. The second thing is the most obvious one, writing the code and posting it. But a lot of the time when we get there, a lot of people imagine that that's it, that most of the work is done and now it's up for upstream to do whatever they need to do with that patch and now I'm gone. Actually, no, it's usually just half of the work, if not less than this. The third point is really important. It doesn't need to be perfect, but you will need to be responsible to reviews and to questions and requests that will come later on, just to make sure that you keep aligning your contribution with what is required from the project. So if we go through those three and we match them with the rest of the process, so getting buy-in is discussion on the mailing list, getting a product review, so getting the feature, the impact on the users being approved, posting the pull request, obviously, and the rest is review steps. So this is things on which you will get comments and you will get guided on. So to make things concrete, we'll take a practical example that we'll actually try to merge right now if we can. So we took one of the bite-sized tasks from the edX tracker. So this is actually, if you haven't contributed to OpenEDX yet, it's a great way to start. It's a list of small bugs and tasks that are in the OpenEDX tracker that are identified by various teams as something that is good as a first contact. And it's great because it's small enough and it's approved already, so you can really focus on understanding the whole process, going through it once, and verifying that you understood more or less how it works before tackling on bigger things. So you don't have to do that, but that's really a great way to start, and that smoothens things up. Actually, for OpenCraft, that's what we use for the recruitment process. All our candidates go through contributing one of those bite-sized tasks, and that's kind of what we use afterwards to judge their contributions. So if you want to find out, you can follow that link. You also have a link from the pull requests in the guidelines for contribution. In the document, you have a link to the bite-sized tasks and bugs. So to show you the contribution we are trying to do today, it's about changing on that button from register to enroll, because registration is actually something that is about creating an account, and getting into a course is more enrolling. So that's fairly simple change, and will help to illustrate a little bit. The first step, getting buy-in, in that case, because we took a bite-sized task, is actually much simpler because it's already approved. So we don't need to discuss it on the mailing list, and we don't need a product review, it's already approved. So again, that's one of the reasons why it's useful to use them as a first contribution. Then we'll try to create the pull request. So we go to edX platform, we fork it, we get to the template of that page, of the course about page. We try to find the button, here it is. We change from register to enroll, and we commit the result. So that in terms is something that we can create pull request from. So we'll be creating a request against the main repository from our own fork. And so after one element which is important when creating a pull request is to give a good description and title to it. So here for the title, because we also have a ticket number, we can even include them. And here I get away with writing a fairly short description in this case because the task is very, very simple and there is already a ticket describing it completely. But actually for most contributions you will want to have a more formal cover letter. So it's not a lot, it's mainly about having a meaningful title, again, saying why you want to do this change, what problem does it solve. Including before and after screenshots is important too. That helps with the product review and the testing, for example, and including some test instructions. You can find out more at the address that is below. So now that we have created the pull requests, you can see that there is a build starting, verifying, running all the tests against my contribution, and we are done with that step. We have the pull request up and ready. So now that's kind of the difficult part. Like we put a lot of effort sometimes into creating the contribution. and we're not sure what's going to happen with it. Is it going to be actually accepted? What are going to be the reviews? And it can be a little bit an anxious phase. And with some truth to that, because in some communities, actually after all those efforts, the reaction and answer that you get from it is that. So at least with OpenEDX, that won't be the case. That it's a really nice and friendly community. So you will. The what? So if there are some objections, just let me know after that. But like in all the cases I've been involved, like it has been fairly friendly, and you can get yes, you can get no, but usually it will be in a constructive way and give you ways to improve your pull request afterwards. So then, seeing my pull request, so Sarina saw it and looked at the code and saw that, well, I need to sign a contributor agreement, and about the code, it's actually failing the build because I didn't update the tests. So there are some instructions also to see that. So the community manager review is just a first phase to kind of check the basics, the test coverage, the passing builds, and a general review of code quality. So I do that, I fix the test, I push again, and now I get a green build. So that hopefully will get us to pass the community manager review. One other thing to take into account is making sure that you're still aligned with the base branch, so that making sure that you don't have merge conflict. Just like if someone does change on master in the meantime that you want to reconcile. While Sarina is still reviewing it on the background, we'll go through the remaining of the steps. So once you will have passed the community manager review, the next step will be waiting for prioritization. So that can be something that sometimes takes a little bit of time. So you're basically waiting on other people within edX most of the time, having clearing time to be able to look at your pull request. So sometimes that can happen fairly quickly, within a few days, but sometimes when people are involved in big projects or in urgent stuff, that can take a little bit longer. So it's important to be a little bit patient at that moment. Your case is actively being advocated internally, I can attest to that, and it will end up getting out of that phase, so don't get too worried about it. You can obviously ask from time to time about updates, about where it is at, but no need to ask every day, it's already taken care of. So once it will be that, then it will go into the domain expert review, so it can be lots of different things, different teams will be involved depending on the type of features that you're looking at. In our case, because it's a very simple change, actually we won't need any of those domain expert reviews. So then that's where comes, hopefully, the merge and verification that Sarina will take care of.
Thank you, Xavier. So for people outside of edX, you can make pull requests upstream, but you can't merge them yourselves. That is where a member of the edX team comes in. And if we look at this pull request, oh, it's so good, and the checks have passed, and I'm going to give it a little magic +1, and we're going to merge some pull requests. Right there. Good job, OpenEDX newbie. All right, so we've merged it, and then the edX team takes care of the verifying that the change worked out well once it goes and is pushed to production. So I now want to go through a larger example of this pull request process. That was a really good kind of small example to kind of walk you through the basics of a really small change. And when I talk about small changes and large changes, I'm not talking about the number of lines of code. That's a common misconception. You can have a pull request that changes 200 lines of code, and you've just fixed typos. The impact of your change, the risk of your change is very small. You can have a pull request that changes 1 line of code, and it updates from username to long username, which would cause, as we found out after a few months of exploration, a downtime on our site of like a day to migrate the user table. That was a 1-line change. The impact was really large. We ended up not being able to take that change. So depending on the impact of your change, that's going to really impact how many of these steps things have to go through. So for a large change that we had recently was a change from Colin Fredericks at Harvard, who decided, you know, I'm sick of the fact that there's no partial credit on kappa problems in edX platform. And that's something that we've heard from a lot of people, but it's not something that we've really had the time to fix. We're a fairly small development team with a lot going on. And so Colin said, okay, enough with this. I'm going to do it. And so the first thing he did was he started a discussion on the mailing list. You can actually go back into the archives of the mailing list. In April, he opened up a discussion. He's like, hey, I've not really coded Python before, but I really want to do this. Can you take a look at my take a look at what I want to do and give me some comments and pointers. And so I'll point out that Colin is not a Python developer, and it's not his full-time job to develop code. So I'm going through this example, you're going to see this timeline that looks really long, but a lot of that is because Colin would have times where he'd be like, I've got a course launching, I've really got to pay attention to this, I've got a real job over here, and so he was very responsive, even letting us know like, I can't work on this for the next couple of weeks. But so when you open that, we had a good back and forth. He actually didn't open up a pull request just yet. He opened up a feature proposal. And especially if you're doing some wide-ranging work and you're really not sure, like, what's the right way to implement it, a feature proposal is a great way to go. That's giving a sense of how you're going to architect your change, where in the code it's going to go, and we can have a lot of people look at it, and before you start really writing a lot of code and then maybe having to rip it all back and start over, you're saying, we kind of give you some pointers and say, hey, you might want to watch out for this. This is a really hairy part of the code base. So from April to June, we worked together with the product team, with some of the architects from edX, and like I said, it took a while, but that was mostly because there was a back and forth that like in email with your grandma, it might take a week or two in between the back and forth. But he had a really solid proposal, and we ended up saying, yes, this is great, implement it, and we're going to accept it. He went and implemented it in June, and he opened up a pull request that went to community manager review. And he hadn't coded Python before. We had a lot of comments just about the style, about how to write tests, I had to teach him how to write tests, and Colin was just the exemplary person to work with. He was really responsive, he was really eager to learn, and it was a big joy to work with him. He ended up opening 2 pull requests because the first one got kind of messed up, and rebasing is a pain for anybody who knows how to do that. That's fine, whatever, close it, open up a new one, do whatever you need to do. And we got through that throughout the month of July, through vacations and stuff. And once the code was in good shape and it was well tested, and he learned a lot of Python, and everything was great, it did have to go into that dreaded awaiting prioritization state. Like Xavier said, it can take a while because at edX, the teams work in an agile fashion, which means that they plan their work in 2-week increments. And they say, this is what we're going to work on for the next 2 weeks, and we're not going to take any interruptions. And so when you have a pull request come in and a team needs to review it, sometimes you'll need to wait for a break, or maybe even 2 breaks, if big pieces of work are being planned. If there's a team working on upgrading Django to 1.8, your pull request may be a little less of a priority for that. And I'll try my best to communicate with that, but it can take a little while to get the reviews. And particularly for this, we needed quite a few domain expert reviews. The first one we needed was a UX review to sort of figure out what's the way that you represent to a user that they've got partial credit. We use the green check mark to represent they got all the points, and we use a red X to represent they got no points. We wanted an in-between icon that represented, look, you did good, you've earned points, but we want to call out that you still haven't gotten 100% on this. So the UX team worked with Colin and got this green asterisk to kind of represent like, hey, great job, you're on the right track. We had to get review from the analytics team, from the teaching and learning team. They did the architecture review, and also from our accessibility team to make sure that the feature was accessible. Once all that happened, the pull request was merged, and now it's a part of OpenEdX. A quick note, if you go look at these pull requests, you'll see that partial credit actually ended up getting reverted. There was a problem with the drop-down problems. It didn't have a unit test, and we're still actually working on that problem. So Colin was super responsive. We reverted the pull request. He submitted a new version without drop-down, and we're still working today. Well, not right now because Harvard's launching a whole bunch of courses right now. But we will get the drop-down hopefully in before the Dogwood branch is released, and everything will be hunky-dory. anyways, thank you guys so much for coming to this presentation. If you have questions, we have about 5 minutes for questions. We'll see you in the pull requests. Hope to see you at the hackathon. Thank you very much. Question?
Can you talk a little bit about testing requirements for submitting?
Yeah, so the question was about what are our testing requirements, and it's a really good question. So we have, can I go back? There's a lot of the slides here. Yeah. Whoops, that was the right slide. So you can see in this screenshot that we have a bunch of tests that we run. So we have a sharded Jenkins instance that's running 6 versions of tests. It's running accessibility tests, bok choy tests, JavaScript, Lettuce, Python, and quality tests. So our testing requirements are as follows. We have a code quality linter that runs, and so you have to introduce no linting violations. We do Pylint and PEP8. We require that your feature is well unit tested, and that's through every case, happy path and sad path. And then for user visible changes, we're going to ask that you probably do just one bok choy test, and that's a user visible testing, render the page, see that all the buttons are in the right place and that all the page elements render. And that one you're going to do more the way that you want the feature to work, because that test is much more expensive than a unit test. We are rolling out accessibility testing. Accessibility testing is a variant of bok choy testing, but we're not quite there yet with externally written guidelines on how you're going to be doing that, but hopefully that will be coming in the next couple months.
You're trying to understand how pull requests are out there and what stage they're in, so you can kind of get a feel for what's going to be changing over the next 6 months. What's the best way to do that?
That's a good question. And it's sometimes it can be really hard to follow from looking at the pull requests. I think, if we look at GitHub right now, we've got 128 open pull requests, and that's just to the edX platform core. We've got a lot of services, IDAs, Xblocks and stuff that are included as part of OpenEdX deploy that aren't necessarily going to be, you're not going to want to look at 50 repos to look. So Ned's going to help answer the question, I bet.
I just want to point out that it's worth noting that all of the edX engineers work through pull requests. So pull requests don't just mean external contributions. All of the work all day that's going on the platform is going to be these pull requests.
Right. So Ned points out that all of the day-to-day work of all edX engineers happen through pull requests. So these pull requests might be large changes. They might be typo fixes. They might be weird disjointed parts of a large feature that's coming down the pipe that would be really hard to see from the pull requests. So I think my advice would be twofold. On our OpenEdX portal, we maintain and we try to update every quarter product roadmap. And the product roadmap sort of lists out sort of what big features we're planning to work on. There's also the mailing list where people often talk about some more smaller contributions or APIs they might be planning. We also have some wiki pages about what's coming up in each new OpenEdX release, sort of what new services we're planning to install, what kind of big features we're targeting for that.
Yeah, the way I follow them usually, it can be fairly verbose, but if you see on the top you have a watch button, so that allows you to get a notification whenever there is something new posted. So if you try to follow everything single reply, you will get very overwhelmed. But if you put it in a folder with just following the thread, you will see in real time the new ones that are coming. So that can be like kind of a morning routine to have a look at what's coming up and maybe digging into the ones that you're interested in. At least that's how I do it.
All right, we're out of official time for questions, but we have about a 10-minute break now. I'm going to stay up here for that. So if you have questions, please come up and ask them. Thank you very much.